Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
So I'm going to read out of order from the verses you are typically discussing, with your permission and with Prabhuji's permission. So I'll read this verse in the 9th chapter, 13th verse. It reads, Mahatmanas tumam partha daivim prakritim ashitaha bhajantyana manaso natvam bhutadimo vyayam. Translation. O son of Pritha, those who are not deluded, the great souls, are under the protection of divine nature. They are fully engaged in devotional service because they know me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, original and inexhaustible. Purport, by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. In this verse, the description of the Mahatma is clearly given. The first sign of the Mahatma is that he is already situated in divine nature. He is not under the control of material nature. And how is this affected? That is explained in the 7th chapter. One who surrenders unto the Supreme Personality of God as Sri Krishna at once becomes freed from the control of material nature. That is the qualification. One can become free from the control of material nature as soon as he surrenders his soul to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is the preliminary formula. Being marginal potency, as soon as the living entity is freed from the control of material nature, he is put under the guidance of the spiritual master. The guidance of the spiritual master is called Devi Prakriti, divine nature. The guidance of the spiritual nature is called Devi Prakriti, the divine nature. So when one is promoted in that way by surrendering to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one attains to the stage of great soul, Mahatma. The Mahatma does not divert his attention to anything outside Krishna because he knows perfectly well that Krishna is the original Supreme Person, the cause of all causes. There is no doubt about it. Such a Mahatma, a great soul, develops through the association with other Mahatmas, pure devotees. Pure devotees are not even attracted by Krishna's other features, such as the four-armed form Mahavishnu. They are simply attracted by the two-armed form of Krishna. They are not attracted to other forms of Krishna, nor are they concerned with any other form of a demigod or a human being. They meditate only upon Krishna and Krishna consciousness. They are always engaged in unswerving service to the Lord in Krishna consciousness. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurum Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Savitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swavadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamsha Shri Rupam Sagratam Sagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamstra He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna. So thank you all for this opportunity. It's very nice to be with all of you. Some of you I remember from serving in Rath Yatra together. We had some good fun. Others I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to meet all of you. I've heard wonderful things from Adisham Prabhuji about how you all are carrying on in Krishna consciousness very strongly and very nicely. So I look forward to being with all of you tonight, so thank you. So today I thought we would discuss, anybody knows what yesterday was? Janmashtami? Okay, so day before was Janmashtami, so Wednesday was Janmashtami. So what was yesterday? Srila Prabhupada's appearance day. Very, very auspicious day. Actually, it's coined as the most blessed event. So I thought we could discuss a little bit about Srila Prabhupada today, if that's okay, with all of your permission. Now this is a dangerous topic. Dangerous in the sense that the glories and the sweetness of Srila Prabhupada are so vast and extensive that if we start, we could be here until like Sunday afternoon. And then it might get troublesome. So, and I didn't bring any notes, or Prabhuji thought a PowerPoint might help contain the conversation. But I made one strategic decision today. You'll all be grateful. I didn't eat lunch, so at least we'll know we'll end at some point soon because they can smell the prasadam being prepared. So I decided to make that strategic decision today. So I read this verse today because we see the definition of a Mahatma. This term Mahatma is tossed around somewhat loosely often in society. But what is a Mahatma? A Mahatma. A great personality. And in society we define so many great personalities. But this question was actually posed to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, posed this question to Ramananda Rai in Chaitanya Charitamrita. And this great person Krishna is answering here is one who is under divine nature. And how one comes to become under divine nature, it is through the association of other Mahatmas, other great souls. There is no other way. So, how many of us would like to be protected by the divine nature of the Supreme Lord? You know what that means? No more anxiety, no more fear, no more stress, no more anything but bliss. That is the divine nature of the Supreme Lord. That is what it means. And it is possible. It is through association. So, how many of you have met Srila Prabhupada? How many of you would like to be in association with Srila Prabhupada? Well, that is what we'll do today. How? By hearing about him. Because by hearing about Srila Prabhupada, it is non-different from being in association. And actually, we have already heard from Srila Prabhupada. How? By reading the purports. Srila Prabhupada's books are so potent. They're actually alive. When we read the purports of Srila Prabhupada's books, it is having a one-to-one conversation with Srila Prabhupada himself. So if you ever long for that opportunity to speak to Srila Prabhupada, just open the book to anywhere and read a purport. And that is Srila Prabhupada speaking to us directly. So this is the great fortune we have. So to get under the shelter of the divine energy, it requires association with the Mahatma. So we'll associate with Srila Prabhupada. But this is not a once-a-year phenomenon. We can associate with Srila Prabhupada every day by reading his books. If we read his books, even just one page a day, directly associating with one who is definitively under the protection of the divine nature and who is the epitome of Mahatma. If Webster's dictionary was to define Mahatma, we'd see a picture of Srila Prabhupada. So let us prove that now. Let us hear and discuss a little bit about Srila Prabhupada. So, just so I have some background, how many of you know something about Srila Prabhupada? A little bit? A little bit? How many of you know a lot about Srila Prabhupada? I know my father. Let's do a little quiz. Where was Srila Prabhupada born? Mayapur? Huh? Kolkata. Okay. What year was he born? Trick question, right? Alright, who's good in math? Anybody? Yesterday was the 127th appearance day of him. So what year was he born? Not you, I know you know. That's my father, by the way. He appeared in 1896. Okay, bonus question. Anybody know Srila Prabhupada's born legal name? Abhay Charan. Yes. How many of you have seen the movie Abhay Charan? Yeah? Very great movie. I'm sure you've been explained that we should not watch movies, but we can watch this movie. So you can go to YouTube and search Abhay Charan, but the problem is once you start, you'll pull an all-nighter. This is the ultimate binge watching. It is the ultimate binge watching is Abhay Charan. It's such a sweet production. It was actually offered to Srila Prabhupada on the centennial of his appearance in 1996, excuse me. So very sweet. Okay, so that gives me some context. So let's discuss a little bit about Srila Prabhupada, give a little short biographical sketch so we know who he is, and then maybe discuss a few of his key tenets, what his key teachings were, and then maybe a few pastimes. Is that okay? So we'll cover those three things. And then if it gets really late, you have full permission to throw something at me. So we'll then end it and go straight to Mahaprasade Govinde. Sound good? Okay. I'll keep an eye on the clock. So, Srila Prabhupada. He appeared in 1896 in Calcutta. He appeared, his father, his name was Gaur Mohan De. He was a very spiritual man. Very wonderful. Srila Prabhupada writes in the beginning of the Krishna book, in the dedication, that he was a pure devotee of the Lord. And he was a merchant. And so they were living in a pretty well-to-do part of Calcutta. He comes from a fairly nice upbringing and background. And Srila Prabhupada, from his very infanthood, became very attracted to spiritual life. At the age of 5, he began celebrating Rath Yatra festivals. He would beg and beg and beg his father, please buy me a cart. And one day they were riding on a bus. And see, I already got to a story, but I couldn't hold. They were riding on a bus, and Srila Prabhupada was crying to his father, and his father was thinking, how am I going to get a cart? And as Krishna does to his devotees, he makes everything possible. The impossible possible. That's why Srila Prabhupada coined one term. Impossible is a word in the Fool's Dictionary. So you may think it's impossible for me to chant 16 rounds. It's impossible for me to give up Netflix. It's impossible for me to do it. It's not. It is possible by the association of the pure devotee. So have faith. So Srila Prabhupada's on this bus, 5 years old, crying and crying and crying. And one lady says to Gaur-Mani, why is your son crying? He says, he wants a ruff for this festival. I don't know how to get him a ruff. There's not on Amazon at that time. There was no Prime even. So she's saying, I happen to have a chariot. You can have it. It's a little broken, but you can have it. So like that, Srila Prabhupada got his first chariot. And he used to perform this Rath Yatra festival. And he did it so exquisitely, 5 years old. So exquisitely, so detailed, that Gaur Mohan De's friends, all the elder adults, They became upset at him, said, why you're not inviting us to your Rath Yatra festival? This is a child's festival, right? Like when children have some doll festival, do we think, oh, how come we weren't invited to the party? But Srila Prabhupada, at this very young age, he was conducting such a spiritually potent festival of Rath Yatra that even the great persons in Calcutta, they were wondering why we weren't invited to this. So this is how his childhood began. His father trained him up in worship. He had very beautiful Radha Krishna deities. He trained him up how to play the mridanga, the harmonium, sing our Vaishnava bhajans. And Gaur Mohan De, he, being a very pious man, he would invite various spiritual persons to his house. And Srila Prabhupada would observe this. And at the end of the meeting, whatever meeting, his father would pray for one blessing. He said, please make my son a devotee of Srimati Radharani. Because Gaur Mohan De knew, if we please Srimati Radharani, then certainly Krishna will be pleased. And so this is the prayer that he had. And Srila Prabhupada, so he went on to his academic studies, and he went to college, in the Scottish College in Calcutta. And there he pursued a degree. He ended up in pharmacy, and he ended up in the pharmacy business. And through many different iterations, he was running a couple of different pharmacies. And it was in 1922 in Calcutta, his friend by the name of Narendra, who was also the name of my father, coincidentally, and also our Prime Minister. But he said, he told Abai at this time, he said, Abai, when Sadhu has come, you should come meet him. And Abai said, I am not interested. Because Abai, all the sadhus his father was inviting, most of them, Abai knew very quickly that they were all bogus. They were propagating, nonsensical philosophy. They were coming with some personal motive. They were not preaching the pure philosophy of Shastra. This was not being disrespectful. This was accurate and descriptive. And so he was always respectful, but he kept distance. So his son said, no, you please come to meet this sadhu. I think you'll really like him. And Prabhupada explains that because he had this experience, his friends would often bring him to different sadhus to validate, is this somebody authorized or not? Just like if somebody brings you a piece of gold, if you're not a jeweler, you'll not know it's real or not. You have to get somebody who knows. So similarly, Srila Prabhupada, was always looked at as like the barometer, the evaluator. So his friend dragged him up to this meeting at one Ultadungi Junction Road to the top floor. And there, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was seated on the Vyasasana and giving a class. And Srila Prabhupada offered obeisances and sat and heard Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur speak. Now, to really understand the significance of Srila Prabhupada's contribution to the world and the significance of his presence in our spiritual lineage, we have to kind of rewind the clock a little bit. So we have to go back all the way to the time of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So how many of you know Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? Some of you? Okay, good. I saw two hands up. Then we know Chaitanya. Yes. So, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Krishna himself, coming in the mood of a devotee. When Krishna gave all the instructions of the Bhagavad Gita, and he says, Sarva dharmam parityaja mamekam sharanam vraja ham tum sarva papebhyo moksha isma sucha. He said, this is what you do. Just surrender unto me. Manmano mava bhakta. Just become my devotee. So Krishna gave all the instructions how to find perfection of life, but he was lamenting. He had one regret. He said, I did not show how to do it. So Krishna comes back, and he appeared just over 500 years ago in Mayapur, not too far from Calcutta. And he came in the mood of a bhakta, mood of a devotee, to teach devotional service. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came and spread the glories of Krishna consciousness. And he has few very special features. But one is that he is called Mahavadanaya. He is the most merciful. Because normally when we give something to somebody, we look at their qualification. Right? If a merchant is going to give you their product, they're going to look at your qualification. What is the qualification you're looking for? Do you have the money to buy that item? Right? So this way. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was so merciful that actually he would go out and find the most unqualified, the most fallen of persons, and shower mercy there first. That was the special mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he gave the simplest of process. He said, okay, don't have to do intense austerity. You don't have to become an erudite scholar of Shastra. You don't have to just chant the holy names of the Lord. And I have empowered the names with so much potency. By that, you will overcome all other obstacles. Just chant. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would go around and preach. Chant, chant, chant. And he made the bold proclamation. But when Krishna makes a statement, it's fact. It's absolute truth. And what proclamation he made? He said that the holy names of the Lord will be chanted in every town and village. Now he didn't say every town and village of Bengal, of India, of Asia. He said of the world. In every town and village. So that's quite a bold proclamation, sitting where the names of Krishna were only being spoken even in India, in few select cities, in the holy dhams. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went on and preached. We could give a whole class on that, so I'll fast forward. So after he left, different persons carried on the teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But after some time, his teachings became lost, or we can say covered. Not really lost, but they became covered. And very few knew about it. And so then one great personality came by the name of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Bhaktivinoda Thakur is one of the eternal residents of the spiritual world. And he came and he wrote profusely about the teachings of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and revived the original pure teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Because the original teachings were now being sort of misconstrued and used again for some personal motive. This is the nature of Kali Yuga. It happens. But thankfully Krishna always corrects it when it does. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who was a great guru in our sampradaya, re-established all the teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But he was writing and he was not able to preach it. So he prayed to Lord Jagannath that you give me one son who can take this message far and wide. I have established everything, but please give me one son. And that son was born and by the name of Vimala Prasad. And this boy became an erudite scholar of his father's books, and then at a very young age began to preach this message very profusely. And he embarked on new territory, because Bhaktivinoda Thakur had full faith in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's proclamation, every town and village. He said it's going to happen. And someday, he predicted, he said that he was speaking this from Mayapur. He said someday, Americans, Chinese, Japanese, all the races will be singing and dancing in the streets of Mayapur. Now, if you said that back in the mid-1800s, you would have been thought to be a fool. But actually, he had faith. And so by the preaching of his son, through all the major centers, he took this spiritual knowledge out to Calcutta, to Bombay, to Delhi, the big metropolitan areas. And so it was none other than him who was seated at the top of this building where Narendra had taken by Srila Prabhupada to go here. It was this sadhu that Srila Prabhupada came to hear. Again, who is Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who was the son of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who was the one who revived the teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is none other than Krishna himself. So Srila Prabhupada was now hearing from a very potent spiritual master. And after the end of the class, Srila Prabhupada offered his obeisances. And immediately as he stood up, Bhaktisiddhanta said to him, he says, you preach this message to the West. You speak English nicely. You please take this to the West. So in the very first meeting, on this very fateful day in 1922, Srila Prabhupada received this instruction to take this message to the West. That message lay dormant as a seed in his heart for some time. It was 10 years later that he formally took Diksha under Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur in Allahabad. That is where he took initiation. And for the next few years, he began to render service. And then in 1936, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur left this planet. But just before he left, Srila Prabhupada wrote him a letter, sort of wishing to render service to his spiritual master. This is the mood of a disciple. And in that letter, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati repeated the same instruction he gave to Srila Prabhupada back in 1922, 14 years earlier. And he said, you please preach this message to the West. So Srila Prabhupada now in 1936 really became emboldened to take this. He explains that, his pharmacy business was becoming challenging and challenging. He actually had a couple of businesses, and they all failed. And Srila Prabhupada says it was the arrangement of Krishna. We are grateful that he failed as a pharmacist, because we are all sitting here as the direct beneficiary of Srila Prabhupada's preaching. So, in the mid-1940s, Srila Prabhupada really began to intensely prepare for this mission that he was about to embark upon. We know the last 10 years of his mission, primarily from 1967 to 1977. But actually, if we read in Lilamrita the story of Srila Prabhupada from this period of around 1945 to 1967, it is a stunning revelation into Srila Prabhupada's extreme character of determination, of resilience, of intellect, of humility, of tireless energy, and so many more qualities. If you ever are inspired, I encourage you to pick up the book Prabhupada Lilamrita. It is an amazing biography on Srila Prabhupada, and you read it. But it's also like binge susceptible. You'll pick it up, you won't put it down. You'll give up all other things. It's so powerful. But particularly this period is very, very instrumental. Again, I don't have the time to go into all the details. But Srila Prabhupada began to prepare to execute this mission. This instruction he got from Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati became the core impetus, the purpose of his life. And actually, this is the perfection of a surrendered soul who understands that to fulfill the orders of the spiritual master, this is actually perfection of life. And this is what gives us real fulfillment. So Srila Prabhupada began preparing. He began writing prolifically. So at this point in the mid-1940s, he was one of the most renowned scholars in India. Actually, his peers were the ones who bestowed the title to him of Bhakti Vedanta. And the meaning of Bhakti Vedanta means one who is the true knower of Vedanta. Now we know, amongst peers, it is hard to gain glories, right? We compete for glorification, we become envious of each other, and right? Because we're competing. But his peers were so stunned by Srila Prabhupada's scholarship that they bestowed this title upon him of Bhakti Vedanta. And because he was writing about Shastra in such clear ways that nobody had yet been able to explain spiritual knowledge in such a succinct, crisp, yet extremely accurate way, that all the scholars were glorified. And they encouraged him to keep writing and keep writing and keep writing. And he started writing this book, this magazine, Back to Godhead. It started in India. And he would write the articles. He would literally go to Delhi, buy the paper. He would carry the paper just to save a few rupees or paisas at that time from a rickshaw, carrying heavy reams of paper to the printer. He would sit there with the printer, do all the typesetting, and oversee the printing. And then he would take the printed Back to Godhead, and he would walk all around Delhi. He would sit in the tea stalls. Thank you. Sit in the tea stalls and distribute the book, these Back to Godheads, and trying to get people to everything he was doing from beginning to end. This was the determination of Srila Prabhupada. Once in Delhi, in the peak of summer, he had been distributing these Back to Godheads with really no food, no water, and he became overcome with heat stroke, and he had passed out in a ditch, almost virtually left to die. And thankfully, one of his friends happened to be going by at the same time and noticed that he was lying. He was so determined. Nothing was going to stop him. He would ride the third-class train from Vrindavan to Delhi, distribute his Back to Godheads, and go back in the evening like this. I mean, it was amazing effort that he was putting forth. And then in the 60s, he was encouraged by some of the people who were reading his writings that, you should write books. Because magazines get read, and what do we do with them? We throw them. He said, you should write books. Because this knowledge is too valuable to be discarded like yesterday's newspaper. And so he became inspired by this guidance and that's when he in earnest started to write books. And actually his spiritual master on the banks of Radhakund once told him, Srila Prabhupada, if you ever get money, print books. Because the books are what he called the Brihad Mridanga. This books, the knowledge can cross oceans. So Srila Prabhupada began to write very extensively. And particularly at Radha Damodar Temple, he was writing these translations. So, and how he would translate? He would have all the commentaries from the prior acharyas, primarily Srila Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur, Srila Baladev Vidabhushan, and a few other acharyas. And he would read their commentary and then write his purports. Because that is the meaning of as it is. As it is does not mean it is up to one's own perception of what reality is. This is not Srila Prabhupada's perception of what the truth is. This is our parampara coming from Krishna himself. And he is presenting this knowledge exactly as it is. And that is why it's so potent. That is why the effect is there. Because there is no dilution to the pure original message coming from the Supreme Lord. And so Srila Prabhupada labored intensely to write these books. And he completed the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam in India. And then he began to think, how I am going to preach this message to the West. That was the instruction I was giving. And so he was begging and pleading with everyone and anyone who would listen to him to give him some ticket, some passage to either America or Europe. Already to this point, some devotees had gone, some of his godbrothers. They had gone to London to try to preach, but it did not work at all. It actually failed grandly. And they came back and saying it's impossible. This message cannot be. But Srila Prabhupada had great faith. One of his godbrothers right. The reason he was successful, he had faith in the holy names of the Lord. If you read Markina Bhagavata Dharma, one of the great poems written by Srila Prabhupada, he writes, I have no other qualification but my faith in the holy names of the Lord. So, Srila Prabhupada was begging and begging and begging, and finally he got some clue that there was one steamship owner by the name of Sumarti Murarji. She was in Bombay, and she owned a steamship company. And she was a pious person. She was a devotee of Krishna. And so he went to go meet her. And of course, big persons, they have some, different gatekeepers before you get to them. And so her secretary, was approached by Srila Prabhupada, and he said, "You wait some time." And then after he came out, he said, she won't be able to meet with you today. And so he came in the morning, and so Srila Prabhupada left, but he waited in the stairwell. He said, "She has to exit through this stairwell. I'm going to wait." And he waited like 6-8 hours in that stairwell. And as soon as she came out the door into the stairs, she realized, oh, this must be the sadhu. And she was shocked that he was still waiting for her. And she became actually embarrassed. "I am sorry I made you wait." And she said, "You come back tomorrow and I'll meet with you." So Srila Prabhupada came back to meet her tomorrow, the next day. And there Srila Prabhupada petitioned that, "Please give me passage on one of your steamships that is heading to America, and because I want to fulfill the order of my spiritual master." So this is the definition of compassion. Now Srila Prabhupada is what age at this point? Anybody knows? 69 years old. He was living in Sri Vrindavan Dham, the most perfect place to practice spiritual life. And he left that to do what? To board a cargo ship. Not a Royal Caribbean cruise line. A cargo ship. 38 days he spent on this cargo ship, eating basically dry cereals and once in a while some cooked vegetables. 38 days. He suffered 2 heart attacks. And he finally reached in New York, first Boston, then ultimately disembarked in New York in 1965. We sometimes wonder, it's 45 minutes to the temple, it's too far. Srila Prabhupada traveled 38 days in a steamship. Why? Not in an air-conditioned or heated car with, nice cushionable seats. Why? To save all of us. This is compassion. One is willing to give up their own comforts, their own facilities. He had a beautiful room in Radha Damodar temple. He was exalted as the great Acharya in Sri Vrindavan Dham. Being respected by everybody. At the age of 69, almost 70, he turned 70 actually on the steamship. And he gave all of that up. Why? Because he was pain. I said, wait a minute, divine nature, there is no pain, right? No stress, no anxiety, no fear, no difficulties. So what is the pain? What was his pain? The devotee is para dukkha dukhi. The only pain they feel is seeing the suffering of others in their separation from the Supreme Lord. Seeing others suffering. Srila Prabhupada became energized. I must come and try to help this fallen conditioned souls. And that is why we are all the beneficiaries. So Srila Prabhupada reached in New York after great effort. Again, I'm just paraphrasing short snippets of it. But after great effort, he reached in New York. And there, 2 years, he struggled mightily. He was literally in New York at one point. He was sleeping in a windowless, basically office. Not even an apartment. It was an office. It was like 7 feet wide and I think 12 to 15. It was like a jail cell. No windows, nothing. Didn't even have a bathroom. To use the bathroom, he had to walk 4 blocks to somebody else's house that he knew. One day he walked out and there were like 2 feet of snow. And he's in dhoti, our India type shoes. Thankfully he had one jacket. He had nothing. Nothing. But he was relentless in his spirit. And he faced so many setbacks. He had prepared the entire translation and commentary and purport to the Bhagavad Gita, the manuscript, all written by hand. And one day he came back to this office and everything he had was stolen, including this manuscript. He came with basically nothing, and even that was stolen from him. He had every opportunity just to go back on the Jaladuta and go back to India, go back to Vrindavan, where life would have been easy and blissful. But he remained determined. He moved downtown to the Bowery district of Manhattan, which was the most hellish place you could ever imagine. How hellish it was. It basically stunk of stool and urine because people were so degraded that they could not even manage that in a proper etiquette. It was such a degraded place. He was staying in one apartment, and his roommate, who was a young boy, went crazy and started almost beating Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada had to run out the front door, stepping over people who were passed out from drugs and all this. And he was just walking the streets completely with nowhere to go. But he had full faith. And ultimately he ended up at 26 2nd Avenue. And there he began his preaching program. Now, spiritual life, it requires some faith. It requires some faith in Krishna. But our faith is very limited. That's okay, because we are not Mahatmas. But Srila Prabhupada's faith was incomparable. I'm going to give you just a simple example of the depth of his faith. Just imagine this. So he's living in this apartment now. After living in an office building and being stolen, being chased out of this other apartment he has this apartment now. And he has a small storefront. And there he is conducting classes. He has no money. Literally nothing. And he would go to the market and he would buy some vegetables. And not even understand. He would start bargaining. I'll not give you this, I'll give you this. And he had to learn it doesn't work this way in the supermarkets. Try bargaining at Kroger's. How will that work? It won't work. But he was so that. So he would buy some vegetables and things like this. And he would cook. And maybe 5, 10, 12 people would come to his program. And he would empty his account each day. Buy all the vegetables, fruits, flour, whatever needed. He would personally cook everything. And then he would serve them. Now think in our condition. I've spent all my money. I'm making all this food. I'll keep 2 chapatis for me. A little bit of sabji, a little bit of dal, a little bit of rice, right? Srila Prabhupada would literally, with his own hands, serve everything out, whatever it is. And he is not thinking, wait a minute, if no Lakshmi comes today, how I will eat tomorrow? He had no certainty of tomorrow's chapatis. Literally, this is what his situation was. But he had full faith in Krishna. He says, Krishna will bring. And so with that, with such love, he would empty his storehouse every day and serve these people. And who were these people? They were drug addicts. They were virtually homeless. They would stink because they hadn't showered in so long. They were often on drugs and so speaking and completely... Srila Prabhupada tolerated with extraordinary patience their fallen and just fed them prasad. Didn't even give them philosophy yet. After some time, a few boys, one boy in particular said, Srila Prabhupada, can we help you clean up? I said, okay. Literally after they all left, he would be the one cleaning everything, washing all the pots. This is Bhakti Vedanta, the scholar. But so humble. He didn't expect anything from them. He knew. Let them mature in their consciousness. And then they will come. And so slowly they started to mature. Even a few of them started to stay in this apartment. So there were 4 or 5 of them staying. These boys were so uncultured, not to their own fault, but by the circumstance of their environment, and it came time to use the washroom in the morning to take bath, Srila Prabhupada would be sometimes 3rd or 4th in line. They wouldn't even think, oh, Prabhupada, you go first. You're a guru. That was the consciousness of folks he was dealing. But Srila Prabhupada never criticized. He never chastised. He just had patience and tolerance and kept slowly but surely preaching this message. These qualities, they're actually inconceivable. They're impossible. We would not have that type of patience. At least I can speak for myself. I would not have that kind of patience. But Srila Prabhupada was so compassionate, so filled with love to save, that he tolerated all these things. And slowly and surely, the movement began to grow. And these boys and girls who were zero qualification. If I can say zero, that's probably overstated, negative qualification. But they came in the presence of Srila Prabhupada. And in the presence of Srila Prabhupada, they lost all of their attractions to the material world. See, to try to understand the potency of Srila Prabhupada's spiritual energy, imagine that we can come into the presence of someone and forget everything. All of our attachments, all of our hankering, all of our difficulties, all of our distress. You know, sometimes when we go into the temple, we experience that, right? You go into the temple and you just lose yourself. Because the Supreme Personality of Godhead is there. That is But this was happening because Srila Prabhupada was so potent. He was empowered directly by the Supreme Lord that he was able to quickly remove these beautiful boys and girls from their hankering. Beautiful in the sense, not from their external condition, but from the internal condition of their surrender to Srila Prabhupada. And so they began helping him, and then the movement started to take off. And these are the glory years that we read, but we don't know the 30 years that preceded that. And even in this time, Srila Prabhupada began to perform some incredible feats. So just to contextualize now how extraordinary Srila Prabhupada's achievements were, and just to share a few qualities of him and some pastimes exhibit them. So if we put it in material terms, just for background, so I'm in the business world. I'm an entrepreneur. I actually teach entrepreneurship at a university, and so I've had the fortune of studying great business leaders going back hundreds of years, so like old to recent history, and I can tell you unequivocally, on a material platform, not on a spiritual platform, but on a material platform, Srila Prabhupada is the best entrepreneur that's ever walked this planet, the most accomplished. And that is can be evidenced by hard facts, not based on sentiment. Of course, sentimentally I believe that, but actually by hard facts. From what Srila Prabhupada was able to do, if we equate it to material terms, starting at the age of 72, he established a multinational corporation with facilities in 108 different locations. He actually established 108 temples. He started with absolutely nothing materially. If you look at 8 great businesses that were formed, Apple, Microsoft in the current day, Ford Motor Company, Standard Oil by Rockefeller, they always had really strong number 2s, number 3s, strong generals in their army to support them. And that is what gave them the ability to go conquer new heights. Srila Prabhupada had 20-year-old children. That was who he was working with. Nobody else. It was him and all these people that he had to personally train up and give the ability through his own potency and help them. And he was sending these young boys and girls all over the world, managing this giant organization. And how successful he was, that after he left, since he left in 1977, his organization has grown 6x. Typically when the founder departs, what happens? Slowly fades and others take over. Where is Standard Oil today? And what happened? This happened. So what were these qualities? Srila Prabhupada was supremely intelligent. Not just spiritually intelligent, materially. There was nothing he could. One time, Gargamuni, one of the early boys, Srila Prabhupada was writing his translations, and then there was a typist who typed them. So one boy was walking down, and he saw this electronics store, and he saw this new machine. It was called a dictaphone. And the dictaphone was that you could speak into it and record it. And so he thought, oh, this would be great for Srila Prabhupada. So Srila Prabhupada could speak his purports, and then we could hear the tapes and type from them. That would speed up the book process. So Gargamuni went into the store. Very expensive machine. This is like leading edge technology. And so, but he had some good money. So he bought this thing. He spent 2 hours with this manager, the store guy, learning how to use this machine. Okay, so this is a pretty, now the sophisticated young boy, and he spent 2 hours learning how to use this machine. And so he's carrying this machine and the user manual. And he's thinking, how am I going to teach Swamiji how to use this? This is an old sadhu from Vrindavan, from Calcutta. I have to teach him how to use this machine. Oh boy, It's like, teaching somebody how to use an iPhone for whatever. So Gargamuni comes and he takes this dictaphone and he explains to Srila Prabhupada. He says, yes. And Gargamuni says, let me show you how to do it. And Srila Prabhupada just grabs the machine. He starts speaking. And Gargamuni's like, what? It took me 2 hours with an expert to learn. And Srila Prabhupada just figured it out. Like, this was his incredible intelligence. Once, in the early days, they were trying to secure a center in New York City. So New York City is a tough place to be. I used to live in New York for a couple of years. It's a cutthroat place. And so the two boys that were kind of managing this, securing the center, one lawyer told them that you give me $5,000 and I'll work on getting you a place. And Srila Prabhupada said, don't give him the money. And these two boys said, no, Srila Prabhupada, this guy's really reputable, great, and you don't know how New York works, you have to go through these things. Srila Prabhupada said, don't give him the money. And what did the boys do? Gave him the money. So a few months later passed, Srila Prabhupada asked, what happened? He said, Srila Prabhupada, we gave him the money. What has he done? Nothing. He says, get the money back. Getting the money back from a lawyer? Impossible. Getting the money back from a New York lawyer? Forget about it. That is truly impossible. So Srila Prabhupada instructed them, okay, write them a letter this way and get the money back. Nothing. So finally Srila Prabhupada came back to New York. This is like almost a year had passed. They could not get the money. They met with them, they did all these things, they threatened, nothing. Srila Prabhupada writes one letter, drops it in the mail. 2 weeks later, boys open an envelope, and guess what was in it? A check for $5,000. This was Srila Prabhupada's he could get anything done. Of course, he could write books, he could decide, but even dealing with these materialists, he was so expert in everything that he did. His scholarship, I talked about it. He wrote so prolifically. If you calculate it, it was about 8 pages per day that he was writing. Can you imagine writing an 8-page paper every day for 12 years? That's what Srila Prabhupada was doing. But when he was doing it, this shows how the power of Krishna can make anything happen. Srila Prabhupada's schedule was like this. I challenge any of us to try to follow Srila Prabhupada's schedule for 3 days. Just 3. And how old are you? Average age in his room, I'm guessing, is 30. I don't know. That's my unscientific poll. He was 70 into early 80s. And what was his schedule? 4 a.m. he'd get up. Okay, we can do that, right? If we can do that, he'd get up at 4 a.m. He would attend Mangal Arati. Then he would chant his japa, go on japa walk. Then he would give Srimad Bhagavatam class. And then he would meet with various people. He would train up his disciples. He would be acquiring different properties, establishing temple, all the different activities. And then he would take lunch around 1 o'clock, often exactly at 1 o'clock. And then, after lunch, he would sleep. For how long? 15 minutes. He would take a power nap. He would take a very short nap. Then he would wake up, continue his affairs into evening, and then around 9 o'clock, he would, kind of retire from his room, into his room, kind of stop seeing people. And there what he would do, he would spend almost an hour singing all his Vaishnava bhajans, just relishing the holy names. And he would do that till 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock, he would sleep. And what time he would wake up? Not 4. 12 o'clock. He would wake up at 12 o'clock. So now what's the total? Who's good in math? What's the total hours of sleep? 2 hours and 15 minutes. He would wake up at 12. And then he would start translating the books. This was, he said, everybody was sleeping. It was just a quiet time when he could concentrate. And he would translate books from 12 midnight until 4 a.m. And then 4 a.m., take bath, attend Mangalarti, and carry on. And how he did, when he did this? From 1967 until he left. Didn't matter where he was in the world. He would fly from India to Australia to Japan to America to Africa to Europe. He would get off the plane and go straight to the Vyasasana, give class, and just roll. No jet lag, no recovery, nothing. Now, is this actually humanly possible? It's not. If you talk to any doctor, it's not anatomically possible. Why is it possible? Because of the divine energy of the Supreme Lord. It's 8:15. So we continue a little bit longer? A few more? Okay. You can throw something when you're ready. I promise. I will not be offended. Usually my wife is the first one to throw. So, Srila Prabhupada, he had this tireless energy. These young boys and girls, 20s, they would wear out. They would be wiped out. They would have shifts to be with Srila Prabhupada because nobody could keep up with him. This is how tireless he was. I spoke about his intelligence. I talked about his intelligence of getting that money back from the New York lawyer. But it came down to even the simplest of things. They would go to Bombay and somebody would bring vegetables for the offering and he would ask how much you paid. And you look at the receipt, you paid double what you need to. You need to go to this market to get potatoes, this market to get this, that. Not even in his hometown. This is in Bombay. He was from Delhi and Calcutta. And he knows in this place where to go. So everything. He was just so supremely perfect in his execution. Very, very meticulous. He had this very unique ability to organize. He established, this system, this GBC system, this Bhaktivedanta Book Trust system, these systems for managing everything that is still alive today. When you look at like the founders of the U.S., we're very proud of so many foolish things, but one of the things we're proud of is this Constitution and how few amendments there have been since. And say, oh, how great it's been, because of limited amendments, that it stood the test of time. Srila Prabhupada established these worldwide systems for managing his international society, and literally virtually nothing has changed. And as soon as we deviate from his systems, everything falls apart. And as soon as somebody goes back to, okay, what does Srila Prabhupada say about this? What does Srila Prabhupada comment about how we should handle this? As soon as we go back to that, things work out perfectly. And this was his supreme capabilities. So he had tireless spirit. He was obviously extremely scholarly. If you listen to his lectures, I mean, he recites from Shastra. There is actually a book that has been published. It's about this thick, and it's the most commonly quoted verses from Srila Prabhupada. And these are just the common ones. And nobody has been able to memorize all of them. But Srila Prabhupada had them at his command. I mean, he could quote from any Shastra. And when he spoke, he never spoke on his opinion. He spoke on the basis of Shastra only. And so he could defeat anybody with that. He had this impeccable charm. People who met him, they speak that as soon as they came in, they just melted. They just surrendered. And people would come to fight with Srila Prabhupada. And they would just melt. But Srila Prabhupada had this ability that he could read everyone. And he was so expert, he would give these giant Pandal programs. And sometimes people would come and, they would try to cause some disturbance. And so, sometimes he would answer questions one way and another time a different way. One time, Srila Prabhupada was giving a lecture and he was talking about, real consciousness and how to find real purpose in life. And he said that, we have to give up this, this animal propensity of eating and sleeping and mating and defending. Because if all that we do, we're going to end up like a dog in our next life. And he was kind of, chastising the loss of human consciousness to dog consciousness. And at the end of the class, one devotee stood up, or not devotee, one attendee stood up and said, Srila Prabhupada, you're talking about how bad it is to be a dog. And he says, but what if I want to become a dog in my next life? And so the disciples were wondering, how Srila Prabhupada is going to answer this. What's he going to say? Give some Shastric reverence, give some... But Srila Prabhupada could read the nature of this person. And what Srila Prabhupada said? You have my blessing. What could the guy say? Nothing. And another time somebody would ask that same question. And Srila Prabhupada would give so much philosophy to break that ignorance. So he knew what was the mood of each person and how they were approaching. And if they wanted to just be in a shell, he would just let them go. And he would spend his time for those who were sincerely trying to learn. And he was so forgiving. People would leave ISKCON, they would leave what he was doing, and everybody would just write them off, but not Srila Prabhupada. The moment they came back, he would embrace them. He would have tears flowing from his eyes. One time, one devotee had left Srila Prabhupada, and he left in a really nasty way. Did so many bad things. Gave so much trouble. And all their devotees were so happy this person left. And after almost 2 years later, this person came back. And they fell at the feet of Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada was embracing him. And actually had tears coming from his eyes. Saying, where have you been? He was pained by even this person who was creating so much trouble. But he had compassion like nobody could imagine. Just trying to save each and every soul. And so this is a micro fraction. This is like a drop in the ocean of the nectar of Srila Prabhupada. I mean, truly a drop in the ocean. In as much as, I cannot offer light to the sun with a flashlight. My words cannot give any real glorification to Srila Prabhupada. His glories are indescribable. They're so voluminous. But what we can do is just peel one layer at a time and relish the greatness of Srila Prabhupada. Because it is by his mercy alone. It is by his mercy alone that we have some access to real philosophy that can take us back home, back to Godhead. And finally, keep us under this divine nature. And so by associating with the Mahatma, like Srila Prabhupada, we can have assured success in spiritual life. And how are we going to associate with Srila Prabhupada tomorrow? By reading his books. How many of you have Bhagavad Gita every year? Please read it every day. If you cannot read one page, read just one line. Take a sticky note and you can move it. But just read it every day. I can guarantee you that it will change your life. Because the mercy of Srila Prabhupada is flowing. His compassion knows no bounds. And whatever difficulties you have, when you have challenges and obstacles in life, they're going to come. Take shelter of Srila Prabhupada's books. Just open his book to anywhere, and you'll get answers to whatever it is that is afflicting you. Because these books are alive. They are not static, mundane literature. They are actually alive. They are so deep and comprehensive, yet accessible. One of Srila Prabhupada's extraordinary gifts is that he made the most complicated things easy for us to understand in very simple language. So please take shelter of these books. And the second lesson I can offer, or takeaway I hope, is what gave Srila Prabhupada the strength to do everything that he did. It was the faith in the spiritual master and the holy names. So let us try to follow in Srila Prabhupada's footsteps by chanting every day. How many of you are chanting at least one round every day? I see double hands. As a doctor gives the sick patient a recipe for curing his ailment, there is a dosage of medicine that's required. So if we really want to overcome the difficulties of life, there's only one way. That is both the beauty and maybe the doubt. There's only one way. And that is through shelter of the Supreme Lord. So, chanting these holy names, it is the single process that Krishna himself came to give. So, make your way to chanting 16 rounds. I know some of you may think that is impossible. But who will make it possible? Krishna and Srila Prabhupada. They will make it possible. I can guarantee you, when you start chanting 16 rounds, the only regret you'll have is why I waited so long. And you will wonder one thing: what was I doing with my time previously? Actually, 16 rounds seems like a big number, no? It's 2 hours. It's 8.6, 8.3% of your day. You give Krishna 8% of your day. You see how he reciprocates the other 92%. Is that a good bartering system? I give 8 and get 92 back? We wish our boss in the office did that, right? No. So you just try. Be determined. Who was the most determined? Srila Prabhupada. Beg and pray to him. Srila Prabhupada, give me a fraction of your determination to take to this process sincerely. And if you do, I guarantee you'll find great success in your life. And so, read Srila Prabhupada's books, chant the holy names of the Lord, and ultimately surrender to a bona fide spiritual master. I am in ecstasy here because I'm looking at this picture of my own spiritual master, and I believe those are my hands that are washing the feet of my spiritual master, and it is one of the highlights of my life. And so Srila Prabhupada, Prabhuji has been very kind to me because I've been staring at it all day. Take these steps, and if you will, you'll find success. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki. Any questions, comments? Sorry, we went a little bit long. 8:28, not too bad. Any comments or questions? Something?
I'll give one comment to start it off.
Yes.
You're actually not out of order. The last sloka that we did was 9:10.
Really?
Unbelievable, isn't it? It was 9:10.
I had no idea.
I know. I had no idea you were going to talk this. It just
That's Krishna's arrangement.
exactly.
I thought I was fully out of order. Yes.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. What is your name?
Mihir.
Yeah.
So Prabhuji, I'm already doing the 2 round of the chanting every day.
Yes.
I want to increase it.
Yes.
But due to difficulty of the time management,
Yes.
but I heard it if you are not just sitting and chanting, you can do your work and at the same time you can continue the chanting. So can we actually do that or not?
So, let me ask. Do we do multitasking when we sleep? Do we do multitasking when we take prasad? So let's not multitask while chanting. So, you can chant 24 hours a day. No doubt. While you're working, while you're driving, while you're showering, while you're eating. No problem. But we should do some dedicated japamala. Japamalas are concentrated chanting. Okay? So your 2 rounds, that is great. Now you slowly add. Because if I tell you all, let's go run a marathon tomorrow, can we do it? No, it seems impossible. But if we put together a program where we start running 1 mile, then 3, then 5, it becomes very possible. And everyone can do it. So same thing with chanting. Make a plan. And you can do it. You will do it. Just stay determined and know the goal and work towards it. See, chanting is like this. The return on that investment is incalculable. You cannot calculate the return. So if I just look and see where I'm spending my time, listen, work takes up only so much of your time. Sleep takes up so much of your time. We actually spend so much time in useless activities. So just add chanting and see how Krishna reciprocates. He will make space in your day. And you'll find a challenge a test along the way. At some point, okay, I'm come to 8 rounds. And then you're going to get some challenge, some travel, somebody comes from to visit you, this, that, something, you get sick. But if you stay determined in the midst of that obstacle, that challenge, and overcome that moment, on the other side of that is an overflowing mercy of Krishna, who then propels us to the next stage. So just make a plan. Okay, I'm at 2 today. I'm going to go to 4 on Ekadashi. On the next Ekadashi, I'm going to go to 6. And like that. Make a plan. Okay, if that's too much, do it. Today is September. October 1st, I'm coming to 4 rounds. November 1st, I'm coming to 6. But make some plan. Don't think in the future you didn't go to school, to college, think at some point I'll graduate. You made a plan. I'm going to take these classes this term, these classes next term, and I'm graduating by this time. We make a plan in our career. I want to get to this promotion by this year, this to this. I want this size house. We make all kinds. Make this chanting plan in the same way. And I'll tell you, if you put 10% of the intensity you put forth to achieve whatever position you're in today materially, you put just 10% of that into your chanting, you'll far surpass whatever you've accomplished materially. Just put a fraction of it. You can do it. Okay? But chant dedicatedly organized. You can chant while driving and all the other times otherwise, but give some time to dedicated chanting. You can walk and chant. Some people walk and chant, some people sit and chant. But on beads, that's simple. Okay? Thank you. Yes? Yeah, Hare Krishna.
The question is like that, is it possible for us, if we take any kind of decision for ourselves or for someone else, could it be affect someone else in negative way, especially the loved ones? And if it
What
does,
type of decisions? Like maybe explain the.
uh, like if I have a two choice, right?
Yep.
One is for the positive result and one is for the negative one. But I don't have any other choice than go with the negative one, right?
Yes.
It's like two-way beneficial. But if I take that decision, so if it affects in negative way,
Yes.
so is it that our decision or is it by the Lord? And if it does, if it like by the Lord, then what's the importance of taking a decision?
Great question. So this is exactly the situation of Arjuna, right? He approached this battlefield with a major dilemma. I fight the war and my family members are killed. My grandfather, my cousins, my guru. I don't fight the war and my whole family live oppressed by the evil Duryodhana. So either way, he was in a lose-lose situation. He fights, he loses. He doesn't fight, he loses. This is where Arjuna, what did he do? He approached Krishna. And he said, Krishna, you tell me what to do in this circumstance. And Krishna, at the end of the Bhagavad Gita, what does he tell him? He says, I've told you everything now. Is everything clear? What to do? Because Krishna will tell us what we should do. But who has to decide? We. It is our decision. That is our free will. We all have free will to choose what to do, what not to do. What I don't get to choose is the result of my decisions. My actions, that is karma. That is coming to me. So spiritual life is about knowing how to make good decisions in life. Shall I do this or shall I do that? And that's what the Bhagavad Gita teaches us. How to make those decisions. The flaw we do in approaching those decisions, like Arjuna thought, I don't want to kill Duryodhana, as an example. But the flaw fundamentally was, he was looking at that situation from the body, not the soul. He was looking what's good for the body. If he was looking what's good for the soul, it's clear he should kill Duryodhana immediately. Why? Because in the presence of Krishna, Duryodhana is going to be relieved from all his sins and go back to the spiritual world. But looking at the bodily perspective, the decision is opposite. Don't fight. So similarly, we have to look at all the decisions from what is good for my soul. And that is what Bhagavad Gita teaches us. So we have the free will, to get to the core of your question now, to make decisions on what to do. Krishna does not force us to do anything. That is why we have responsibility for our actions. That's why we cannot blame Krishna. Krishna says, Prakriti karyamanani gunai karmani sarvashaha ahankara vimudatma kartaham iti manyate. He says, we foolish people think we are the doer. He says, you're not the doer. But then Krishna in the 5th chapter says, I am not the doer. So then who is the doer? The doer is, we have the desire for various activities, and it is by the material nature that things get carried out. So the circumstances that I am in today is due to my past karma. So how to find solutions in the midst of those? We must approach it from a spiritually centered position. If we approach it from a materially centered approach, we will fail. And how do we know? Because millions of lifetimes we've been traversing this world trying to solve our problems. Anybody has solved birth, death, old age, disease? We've tried. It is only through a spiritually centered solution that it will actually be solved. So approach your circumstance from that platform. Now the question becomes, how do I do that? That is where we need a little bit more intimate guidance, right? And we need some counseling, some support. Okay, how do I apply the principles in this Bhagavad Gita to my current circumstance? And that is where Guru comes in. That is where some senior devotees can come and help us think through that. But ultimately, that circumstance, see, we want to blame Krishna, right? So when we're doing something and it fails, we say, Krishna, where were you? And when we're doing something and things are great, I did it! Yay! I would tell you a great story about the Brahmana who killed a cow, but I don't want to take up too much time. But this is the nature. So we have to understand. No, it is our free will, but the circumstances that we are in are forced upon us by our past actions only. And Krishna wants nothing more than to bring us out from our difficulties. Just like he very quickly brought Arjuna out from his difficulties, he can also bring us out. But we have to make that decision that you're confronted with from a spiritual position, not from a material bodily condition. And if you do, you're guaranteed success. Any other questions or comments? Once again, thank you very much. Please forgive me for going a little bit